Soma is a first-person horror game set in the Pathos 2 deep-sea scientific facility and follows Simon Jarrett, who after having a brain scan in 2015 suddenly wakes up in the far future.
Hey you, can you talk? Can you talk like the others? Why are you like this? You want some structure, Joe? Yeah, you do. So weird. Doesn't make any sense. I'm gonna shut you down now, okay? Yeah, you're creepy as hell, so I'm gonna shut you down.
Atmosphere. After the cataclysmic events that take place prior to the game, the Pathos 2 facility is barely holding itself together, with the black structure gel leaking from the ceiling, the buckling metal walls are bulging and dripping water, and there are strange metallic growths coming out of the surfaces. It's cold, metallic, and very alien. The early game is filled with paranoia since you have no idea what's going on, but as the story pans out, this feeling is replaced with an overwhelming amount of hopelessness and dread. There's no world left to save. The game does have a few serene moments, viewing the ocean through the glass windows of Pathos 2, but even after a while it starts to seem murky, menacing, and without end. The sea floor is immense and confusing with only dim red lights that lead your way, but they can also double as the headlights of an enemy robot chassis. As you continue from base to base, from subterranean power stations to the empty living quarters of Pathos 2, isolation sets in as you realize the only humans you've seen are the ones you've had to put out of their misery to progress, and the hopes of Simon and Catherine of finding any biological humans begins to seem hopeless too. When you arrive at Theta and find all the crew members in a catatonic state beyond saving, this is reinforced yet again. Every new base is extremely unwelcoming or just eerily quiet, until the climb down to the abyss where the overwhelming feeling of insignificance comes flooding in. The pitch-black darkness of the water and the strong currents of dust blowing around are disorientating, and when you lose track of the path to Tau, it feels like you're going to be lost at sea forever, if not devoured first. Soma has many different moods, and as the stakes rise, so do they as the story progresses. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. Soma has some really great scripted events, from noises and screams playing in the narrow crawl spaces that make it feel like something is in there with you, to the enemy interactions like this one in Lambda where you see the robot trying to break the glass and enter the room to get you before giving up. The enemy designs are creepy beyond belief, with iconic ones like Terry Akers looking like they were bathed in structure gel, and some of the other enemies being large, walking blobs of mutated flesh and the black oozing liquid. Some of the enemies have weaknesses like lack of sight or mobility, which make for some incredibly intense moments as you try to sneak around them or distract them by throwing objects. Other enemies have no weaknesses, and in the narrow corridors of Tau, one of the last areas of the game, you come against Yoshida in a power suit, who you can only outmaneuver by trying to abuse the high-pressure, slow-moving doors. Looking directly at enemies is discouraged since it seems to reveal your location. It was carried over from Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and it's still a really great way to inflict unseen fear. You don't know what the enemy is doing if you can't look at it, and you have to rely on sound design to hope it's not right next to you. You generally only have 2 hits before death, with the screen becoming distorted after 1 hit and the second one giving you possibly the most disturbing game over screen in any horror game I've ever played. The game forces you into a ton of awkward moments like in Theta, where you have to smash a window in an area where the horrific and murderous Terry Akers can hear everything you do. Every failed attempt at smashing the window with the relatively light objects in the area brings Akers running your way. The chase sequences are terror-inducing, with some enemies being fast and having harrowing screams, to the one aboard the Curie that teleports towards you and jumps, so you never know how close behind you it is until you turn around to find out. Finally, there's the abyss and its horrific giant anglerfish that feels like it should be able to devour you whole. The game is full of terrifying moments, and whilst it's not as full on as Amnesia: The Dark Descent, it puts you into these moments for much longer. That's 2 Harry Masons. Sound design. The soundtrack is haunting but also quite sorrowful, with some parts sounding like shimmering ghosts or some kind of metallic glistening sheets of ice that chatter. There's some eerie pieces that give off a feeling of decline and age, and there's some melancholy piano tracks that sound as desolate as they did in Amnesia: The Dark Descent. The electronic pieces all sound cold and empty when things start to get sinister. The chase music is often overly distorted and frantic like jittering insects. There's quite a few incidental pieces with some real sci-fi sounding mystery pieces that play when you discover a new area, and finally the digital nightmares invoked by the shrill, shrieking synths that resemble computers crying in vain or a reverb-soaked whimper in the darkness. The menacing tune that plays while you're being hunted is intolerable for long periods of time. There's a ton of variety to the soundtrack that either makes the moments emotionally powerful or creepy and disturbing. There are sound effects for so many things, from breathing apparatus in Simon's diving suit to the creaking and gurgles of the deep ocean to really put you in the environment. The quality is really high too, with some sound effects being sickeningly clean, and crunches and distorted hits are impactful to say the least. Thanks to the incredibly immersive sound space, throwing things around always sounds realistic, and the acoustics are often really good too. The voices of enemies are all really strained and mutilated, with electronic glitching blending together really disturbingly with the pained voice. They all mutter things, but it's hard to understand what they're saying. The voice acting has some odd spots where Simon and Catherine are a bit too chipper for what's going on, but the rest of the time they're both really great. Nearly all of the voice acting is perfect, with other characters being easily identified through their audio logs and data mines. Nearly every aspect of the game was a treat to headphone users, and it was both realistic and immersive. That's 3 Harry Masons.
Oh god, he's dead? He's dead.
Gore. There are bloodstains and people with exploded heads in areas like Omicron, but scattered throughout all of Pathos 2 there are some really unsettling bodies, and thanks to the Warden unit's attempts to prevent death, it created some creepy, disturbing cadavers with metallic implants and artificial enhancements that both look and sound extremely painful. The bodies that are lucky enough to not be touched by structure gel are pretty gnarly too, with a lot of mutilated remains and harrowing suicides. Then there's the part where Simon loses his arm, and whilst you don't see it a lot, climbing the ladder with a ripped off hand is more unpleasant here than any other game I've seen try the same thing. Using the health stations feels wrong as you shove your fist into the opening and black lines crawl across the screen, and the reveal that you're just a walking dead body in a diving suit is really disturbing too. Needless to say, it nails the gore. That's 4 Harry Masons. Story. After going for an experimental brain scan in 2015, Toronto resident Simon Jarrett suddenly awakens in 2104 and finds himself alone in a dark, metallic facility. The story is by far the best element of the game. In 2103, a comet hits planet Earth and wipes out all life on the surface, leaving only the survivors of the cataclysmic event, the inhabitants of Pathos 2, the deep-sea research station at the bottom of the ocean. After Simon wakes up and meets several confused robots who seem to not realize they're robots, Simon realizes that he also isn't the real Simon Jarrett, and that the original died in a hospital bed a few months after having the brain scan, and he's the imprint of the original's personality placed in a robotic diving suit. At the same time, Catherine Chun, a scientist at Pathos 2, is trying to get brain scans of all the staff members and launch them into space on a virtual habitat called the Ark, to continue humanity, as life on Pathos 2 can only end with death. It raises all sorts of questions about what makes humans what they are. Does the human body define humanity, and are brain scans of human beings more or less legitimate than the biological variety? This bleeds into people's beliefs too, with the frankly terrifying idea of continuity that spreads about the staff, who think killing themselves will allow their transition to their digital being to be smoother in some way. Soma also makes you make a lot of hard decisions that often feel like they're testing your morality, and sometimes there is no good choice. Thanks to the Warden unit refusing to allow people to die, it forces you through some powerful and heavy moments. There's a lot going on in the background with believable personal disputes between staff and creepy goings-on between Johan Ross and Mark Sarang as they discuss the Warden unit, Pathos 2's rogue artificial intelligence. There's the harrowing recollection of the moments after the comet hits in a recorded voice log from the crew member of a Curie, which is hard to forget. It also tells the story of what happened to the survivors with some chilling tales of characters like Terry Akers and the sad and sometimes depressing fates of other members of the Pathos 2 crew who sacrificed themselves for the Ark, and thanks to the ability to data mine bodies, you can hear their final moments before death. And finally, the story of Simon and Catherine, with them both pondering their own existence as they travel the deserted, run-down halls of Pathos 2 and discuss their unconsciousness and the feeling of being alive. It's hard to understate, but I think that Soma has by far the best story in any horror game I've ever played, making the final score 5 out of 5 Harry Masons. Soma is a strong contender for the best horror game of all time for me. It really can't be stated how many little things make up the experience, with personal tales of loss, its immaculate sound design, the set pieces and design of the monsters, to the overwhelming feeling of isolation and hopelessness that the game inflicts on the player. It's not darker or more frightening than Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but Soma touches on a different level. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I might be an AI in a diving suit, I certainly did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and I advise you don't either. There will be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching. And always go check out Bumps in the Middle of the Night. Peace.